Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome back to another gospel reflection. So today the church celebrates a great feast in our All Saints Day, and so we celebrate all the saints of the church. And so today I want to talk about what makes a saint a saint. So before we get started, I guess to define a saint is someone who is in eternal union with God in the heavenly kingdom, but their place in the heavenly kingdom, their eternal union with God, depends upon the kind of life that they lived here on earth. And so now today I want to talk about 2 to 3 characteristics that makes a saint a saint. So the first characteristic is acknowledging who you are in relation to God. So St. John says in his first letter, chapter 3, Beloved, we are God's children now. What we will be has not yet been revealed. What we do know is this: when he is revealed, we will be like him, for we will see him as he is. And all who have this hope in him purify themselves just as he is pure. So St. John reveals 3 things. Firstly, that we are children of God, and that is our identity. Secondly, that we are to have a hope for something that has not yet been revealed. So in other words, we are to have hope for that eternal kingdom to come, the heavenly kingdom. And thirdly, we keep this hope in our hearts and we keep ourselves pure in preparation for that eternal kingdom. So there are 3 things. And when we look at the saints of the church, all these saints have accomplished these 3 things. Firstly, they knew their identity. They knew who God was in relation to them, and they knew who they are in relation to God. Secondly, they had a hope for another reality, which is why they weren't afraid of death. They weren't afraid of martyrdom. They weren't afraid of persecution. Maybe they were afraid, but they knew that it was something that they had to go through. Because they had a hope in another reality. And thirdly, they kept themselves pure, they kept themselves holy for this reality to come, for this hope that they have in their hearts. So that is the first, essential characteristic of a saint. The second characteristic of the saints, which we can be inspired by in our own journey to sainthood, is this idea which you may have heard before, which is to live in this world, but not of this world. And the saints very much, lived their life like this. They lived in the world. They lived in different times. They lived in the times of Reformation, the times of great persecution, but they didn't live according to how the world was living. They lived according to the law of Christ. And that is something that we need to try and aspire to live like. We live in this world, and the society, the world will teach us many things. They'll say, if you don't do this in this way, you're wrong, or you're bad, or you're immoral. There's this great morality that this world is following, which is not the right morality. But if you don't follow this morality, then you are seen as the villain, you are seen as the enemy. And that's what persecution is. But these saints, they didn't follow this morality that society was giving them, but they followed the laws of Christ. And this led them into martyrdom. This led them into, to death and great persecution. But their great reward is that heavenly kingdom. And so it's one of the most hardest things, because it's not easy when you are living a particular kind of lifestyle and then the people around you are living an opposite lifestyle. It's so hard. But when we look at these saints and see their endurance, their perseverance, and when we ask them and ask for their intercession for God to give us that endurance and that endurance in suffering, then we too, like them, can get through it and reach that heavenly kingdom. And in today's gospel, Jesus mentions the Beatitudes, and he is a perfect example, of the Beatitudes. He's a model of the Beatitudes. And if I was to take one, which is when Jesus says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy." We know that Jesus himself is mercy, because on the cross, blood and water gush forth from his body, showing the great mercy that he has for humanity. And when in today's world, people will say, society would say that revenge is justice, revenge is the way to go around things. But Jesus is showing a different kind of lifestyle. He shows us to forgive our enemies. He tells us to show mercy, and that's a completely different way of living life here on earth. But that is an example of living in this world, but not of this world. So in our journey to sainthood, it's important that we have a saint who we can devote ourselves to. In other words, having a saint whom we can personally relate to, because this saint that you're devoted to lived a life that we can relate to. For example, Saint Augustine, he's always a great example of that redemption, of that transition from living a bad lifestyle, a life of lust, to a life of holiness, to a life of defending the church, defending the faith, living for Christ completely. Saint Augustine is a perfect example of that, and a lot of us can maybe relate to that. A lot of us maybe lived a particular kind of life, but now we have transitioned. Now we live a different kind of life, a life for Christ. And having these saints and being devoted to them, asking for their intercession, is always a great strength for our journey to sainthood. Because ultimately, my dear friends, that is what we are all called to. We are all called to the life of a saint. We are all called to become saints. Because like I said in the beginning, a saint is someone who is in eternal union with God. And that is the life that we all have to strive for. That is the life we are called to, a life with God. So my dear friends, thank you so much for listening, for tuning in. Happy feast day of the saints. And maybe today, you can maybe, when you in your own personal prayer, ask for the intercession of a saint whom you are closely devoted to. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. Have a great week ahead. God bless.